so many of the conflicts that we have with, especially loved ones, family members, come from this place of, I have some sort of sense of ownership, whether that's a parental relationship or familial or even, boss or employee or whatever. And when people are liberated from being the role that they are in my life, we get to engage with them as spiritual beings for the first time. And so during the course of that afternoon, my life and world was transformed. And I'm so grateful for that process. So last week, Reverend Cindy Wright talked to us about the spirituality of change. And one of the ideas that she put forward was this idea of God in hiding and how we can move out of that space. This idea that there's this potentiality within each of us. It's there. It's actually infinite, which is humbling. But we get to tap into that. And she outlined a number of things that we can do to move in that direction. To be present, to be still, to know that God is at work, to be our higher self, highest self, and to see the Christ in others. We honor all paths here, all paths towards spiritual transformation, and we have a multitude of ways to get there. We have a very active Course in Miracles group here, several actually, and there's a parallel in there too, with observing, seeing what the origin of the problem is, being still, asking the Holy Spirit for help, making a decision to move forward, and then receiving. So today what I'd like to talk about is the idea of forgiveness. I'm going to be working from Emmett Fox's Sermon on the Mount. Yes. Emmett's an amazing man. If there's somebody that's deceased I could go have coffee with, it would be Emmett. He's changed my life that much, so I'm very grateful. There are 2 copies left in the bookstore, by the way, so you get there quick to get your copy. The topic of forgiveness, this is something that actually I've wanted to do for quite a while as far as a piece, and the opportunity presented itself to speak with you all today, and so here's that opportunity. With everything that's going on in the world today, it really seems like as a species, we continue to struggle. We see it at multiple levels, in regions of the planet, in countries, in political parties, in states, and it's just pervasive everywhere, the conflict, the intolerance. We see it in our school districts and local government, and we've experienced some of that here in our own community recently. So most of what I'm going to do is tell a story about something that happened 35 years ago. But in talking to Nina, my wife, before the service, she said, I want to know, what can I do right now? What can I do right now to change things, to make a difference? And so we'll have that opportunity when we move into the meditation. So I'd like to start out talking a little bit about whenever there's something that we want to pursue spiritually, it starts with either a problem or a question. So let's go ahead and start with the problem. If there's the problem, you look long enough, you'll always find it. So Emmett writes in Sermon on the Mount on page 169, the forgiveness of sins is a central problem of life. Sin is a sense of separation from God, and it's a major tragedy of human experience. It is, of course, rooted in selfishness. It is essentially an attempt to gain some good to which we are not entitled in justice. It is a sense of isolated, self-regarding, personal existence, whereas the truth of being is that all is one. So I think we can see from that quote, it's pretty obvious that there are some ideas in here that aren't true. That's some supposed good. I mean, that's a really subtle way of saying, I in many ways in my life, experience the engagement of a character defect thinking I'm doing something noble. It's humbling. It really is humbling. And then, not getting some good that we really aren't to receive in justice. And that counts not only for myself, but for others too. How many of my resentments stem from me perceiving somebody else getting something that they shouldn't get in justice? It works both ways. So I'd like to talk a little bit about my first introduction to forgiveness, and this is where things go back a little bit. As many of you know, I'm in recovery. I've been in recovery for many years. I do a lot of work with other men in their personal transformation, and it's a very rich process. And when I first went through the process of the steps in recovery, you identify the problem, you identify what the solution is, and then I made a decision to turn my will and my life over to a power greater than myself. Immediately following that, we get the opportunity to write down on paper absolutely everything that we carry in terms of resentment, all of our fears, all of our harms to others, and then we get to go over that with another human being and then carry it to God. Yeah, it's a humbling process, absolutely. But part of that demonstration is that another human being can witness all that stuff and still love us unconditionally. Poof. Even at our worst. We have an amazing capacity to love. And so doing all that, we become informed for the first time. What are the things that led to my behaving badly, looking at those underlying motives and so forth. And then we go to God and ask to be shifted. Please change me. We rely on source. We go back to that, our fourth principle that we have in here, praying, and asking God, please change me, bless them, change me. And then we get to go out and correct all of that. We get to go back out and make amends to people. And in preparation for that, my sponsor had me do something that came out of Sermon on the Mount. It's a great book. It's a wonderful treatise on Christ's teachings through a 20th century New Thought leader. And at the back of the book, he does a breakdown of the Lord's Prayer. And of course, forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And we'll go into that in just a minute. But the purpose behind that activity was for me to, as I move into trying to make relations right with people that I had harmed, to go into it with an honest motive, to not have an agenda in that relationship. So I'm going here just to clean it up, and there can't be any expectation of the other person when I do that. And so in order to have the purest motive, never pure, I needed to ask for that experience of forgiveness for that person and set that intention to forgive them. And so he had me work this process that I'm going to go through today to talk about, that I'll talk about how that process works and what the manifestation of the demonstration was that came out from that. And then we'll have an opportunity to engage with it too. So I'm excited for this piece and hope you all get something out of it that benefits you and your relationships in this community as a whole. So I'm going to read a little bit. It's probably a little more reading than you'd like, but bear with me, please. So from page 170 of Sermon on the Mount, we must positively and definitely extend forgiveness to everyone to whom it is possible that we can owe forgiveness, namely to anyone we think we can have injured us in any way. Jesus leaves no room for any possible glossing over of this fundamental thing. He does not say, forgive me my trespasses and I will try to forgive others. Or, I'll see if it can be done. Or, I will forgive generally with certain exceptions. He obliges us to declare that we have actually forgiven and forgiven all. And he makes our claim to our own forgiveness dependent upon that. So over the past 35 years, I have had countless discussions about the order of forgiveness. And we have in here as well. And I really feel strongly that based on my experience and my observations, that it is that activity of going out and forgiving others, that there's a demonstration that's made. And what that demonstration is that I have a capacity to forgive. If I can forgive everybody, certainly my higher power, which is much more powerful than me, it's infinite, has that capacity to forgive. Does that make sense? Yeah, okay. So we get to do the demonstration. That's the thing, and it's not easy. So he goes on to say, we cannot make this point too clear to ourselves that we have got to forgive. Or as my second sponsor would say, we get to forgive. When you hold a resentment against anyone, you are bound to that person by a cosmic link, a real though mental chain. You're tied by a cosmic tie to the thing that you hate. The one person perhaps in the whole world whom you most dislike is the very one whom you are attaching yourself by a hook that is stronger than steel. Is this what you wish? Is this the condition in which you desire to go on living? Remember, you belong to the thing with which you are linked in thought at some time or other. If that tie endures, the object of your resentment will be drawn again into your life, perhaps for further work to wreak havoc. Do you think you can afford this? Of course. No one can afford such a thing, and so the way is clear. You must cut all such ties by a clear and spiritual act of forgiveness. You must loose him and let him go. By forgiveness, you set yourself free. You save your soul. And because the law of love works alike for one and all, you help save his soul too, making it just so much easier for him to become what he ought to be. We have so many parallels to this in here about, mostly like Hawkins and our energy levels, and so we switch that tie. We don't break it because we're all one. It's shifted. The energy is shifted. So one of the early resentments that I had to contend with was with a family member that was physically abusive to another family member. And justified resentment by really any normal societal framework that I had been exposed to in my life up to that point. And this idea that we get to forgive was foreign. We talk about the perceived benefit. I call it the lie that sits underneath it. It's this idea that somehow there was something positive that was coming out of that. Maybe punishing the other person at some level. There's a saying that holding a resentment is like drinking poison and then waiting for the other person to die. It just doesn't work. The other one is that I was doing right by society and my family by, consciously condemning this person. I'll talk a little bit later about the demonstration that moved me out of that as part of this process. But I'd like to move now into the technique and the method. So returning back to page 174, the technique of forgiveness is simple enough and not very difficult to manage when you understand how. The only thing that is essential is willingness to forgive. Provided you desire to forgive the offender, the greater part of the work is already done. People have always made such a bogey of forgiveness because they have been under the erroneous impression that to forgive a person means you have to compel yourself to like him. Happily, this is by no means the case. We are not called upon to like anyone who we do not find ourselves liking spontaneously. He goes on further to say, we're not obliged to like anyone, but we are under a binding obligation to love everyone. Love, or charity as the Bible calls it, meaning a vivid sense of impersonal goodwill. This has nothing directly to do with feelings, though it is always followed sooner or later by a wonderful feeling of peace and happiness. So there's this different idea on how to be in these kind of circumstances and how we can move into a place, and we get to utilize our powers We have the wisdom that we can draw from. We have our will, the power of will, which when aligned with God's will is infinite. Yeah, we're maybe throwing a trickle in there, and then there is infinite power next to it. So the method of forgiving is this. It says, get by yourself and become quiet. Repeat any prayer or treatment that appeals to you, or read a chapter of the Bible. Then quietly say, I fully and freely forgive whoever it is. I loose them and let them go. I completely forgive the whole business in question. As far as I am concerned, it is finished forever. I cast the burden of resentment upon the Christ within me. They are free now, and I am free too. I wish them well in every phase of their life. The incident is finished. The Christ truth has set us free. I thank God. What's lovely about that is it's discreet. You get to do it once. But he goes on. Then get up and go about your business. On no account repeat the act of forgiveness, because you have done it once and for all, and to do it a second time would be to tacitly repudiate your own work. Yeah. So I'd like to talk a little bit about what the demonstration was in my life. I took that list of people and went out to a park. I sat under a tree for maybe 2 hours, and I went down every person on that list and did this process. And it is one of the more singular spiritual experiences I've had in this lifetime. What happened to me was that I was delivered from a place where the people that I had been holding resentments against were no longer reduced to what they had done to me. They were expanded. Another amazing side benefit that I wasn't expecting beyond that was that I was able to let go of people being defined as their roles in my life. So many of the conflicts that we have with especially loved ones, family members, come from this place of, I have some sort of sense of ownership, whether that's a parental relationship or familial or even, boss or employee or whatever. And when people are liberated from being the role that they are in my life, we get to engage with them as spiritual beings for the first time. And so during the course of that afternoon, my life and world was transformed. And I'm so grateful for that process. And that process came through my behaving really badly for a long period of time and setting intention to go clean it up. So you all have a great advantage on this. The trick is motivation. Am I willing to do that? Am I still willing to do that today? Am I willing to do that with the things that I did that were egregious an hour ago? Okay? And so hence back to my wife's idea of what can I do now? So I'd like to talk a little bit now about the follow-up piece. And he goes on to give us a few more instructions. He said, afterward, whenever the memory of the offender or the offense happens to come into your mind, bless the delinquent briefly and dismiss the thought. Do this however many times the thought may come back. After a few days, it will return less and less often until you forget it altogether. Then perhaps, after an interval, shorter or longer, the old trouble may come back to memory once more, but you will find now that all bitterness and resentment have disappeared, and you are both free with perfect freedom of the children of God. Your forgiveness is complete. You will experience a wonderful joy in the realization of the demonstration. And I can report to you today that all of those resentments that I carried with me, particularly that one about the domestic abuse, it's gone. It's just gone. It's not there. There's compassion. There's maybe still a little sadness, but there's no resentment. And I'm so grateful for that. So the last piece I want to cover is the dailiness of things. You know, we're a lot about practices here. You know, the fifth principle that we get to do in Unity is that we don't just get to know this stuff, we get to do it. We get to engage with it, enrich our lives, build it into the fabric of everything that we do. So there's an opportunity to be really magnanimous in here. So it says, everybody should practice general forgiveness every day as a matter of course. When you say your daily prayers, issue a general amnesty, forgiving everyone who may have injured you in any way and on no account particularize. Simply say, I freely forgive everyone. Then in the course of the day, should the thought of grievance or resentment come up, bless the offender and dismiss the thought. So what a powerful idea that you can come to consciousness in the morning, lying in your bed, and before your feet hit the floor, you can grant general amnesty to the entire population of the planet. Good way to start the day, huh? So the result of this policy will be that you very soon find yourself cleared of all resentment and condemnation. And the effect upon your happiness, your bodily health, and your general life will be nothing less than revolutionary. So I'd like to close with a quote. I think it befitting on the eve of Martin Luther King Day. It's a short one. Forgiveness is not an occasional act. It is a constant attitude. And we get to adopt that. So I want to thank you all for the opportunity to share this piece.
Divine love through me blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, all that I circulate, and I am grateful.